Welcome to the podcast dedicated to helping you plan for your exit. Today, I've got with me three special guests because we're going to have a bit of a panel conversation and explore all things exit planning around timing. I've got Guy Skinner from Citygate Consulting. Guy's an expert in personal financial planning and working with business owners and their companies to prepare pre and post exit. Welcome, Guy.
Good morning, Daryl.
Thanks for joining us. I've also got Jeremy Leboff with us today. Jeremy learned everything he knows down the pub. His background is as an entrepreneur and business owner before developing and applying his skills and talents as an accountant with various expertise of understanding business owners. Welcome, Jeremy.
Good morning. Thank you, Daryl.
Thanks for joining us. And I've got my business partner, Christine Nicholson. Christine has got the widest and most varied career I've ever come across in my life. She's, to last count, I think, worked with business owners on 50 plus exits, has got a finance director background, has got a bit of law, has a bit of other things as well. Thanks for joining us today, Christine.
Good morning.
Great. Well, today we're going to talk about when's the best time to start planning your exit. We come across, all of us in our various walks of life, come across business owners preparing for exit, getting to exit, or have already done a deal. And then once they've done the deal, they talk to their advisors. And I get feedback and from all sorts of business advisors saying, I wish I'd known earlier and then I could have had more impact and helped the client more. So Guy, when is the best time to start planning?
Well, as we always say to clients, start with the end in mind. But I think most business owners won't necessarily start a company with a eureka moment and it be a sudden spark and flash of inspiration. They're generally going to think about, what do I want? Why will I do this, that, or the other? And have in mind some sort of figure that they would like to exit the company with, or an amount of wealth that they would like. But whether or not they formalize that and to what extent they really put it down on paper and think about how they will get from A to B is a different matter entirely.
Okay. Jeremy, where does that fit with you from a tax planning and perspective?
Well, there's two sides to it. From where I'm sitting, is there's that journey of financially planning in terms of Guy's got that where we need to get to, but projecting what is my business going to look like. So the financial modeling and the stages to go through that, and also making sure that you have got the right tax planning in place. There's too many occasions where we get told after a deal has been done or a decision has been made that this is what's happened, and then we're like, well, actually, you've missed out on some very key points of your tax planning. It was only recently that the change of entrepreneurs relief caught out some people, and that meant that that some people that thought they were going to get 10% tax charge got 20% tax charge on their gains. And knowing and planning in advance is key, because actually it's all great, but if you suddenly realize you're going to be hit one way or another because of tax charges, then you're kind of being self-defeating. So yeah, that has to be part of the upfront questioning. There's the legal side, and then there's also the tax side of it.
So Jeremy, should we be using tax to help form our strategy, our business strategy, or should we be thinking of designing the best strategy and then fitting in the tax planning around that? What comes first?
Personally, I'm not in favour of letting the tax tail wag the dog. I think that people who are going down that route can sometimes get too clever for their own good, and you'll end up tripping yourself up over something that's tax related when actually you're losing sight of the fact that you've got a business to develop and grow and add value to. It's part of the due diligence process. In terms of it's your own personal due diligence, you need to make sure that you've got that tax planning in place, whether it's a question of getting the right structure at the beginning and then move, whether it's a question of looking at ownership and what that looks like, or what the tax breaks are or incentives or whatever else, of doing one decision or another. That has to be part of it. But the strategy is wealth accumulation, getting your business to a place where it's going to be worth something to somebody, and the tax needs to go alongside it. So for me, strategy, with careful tax planning as part of the strategy, not the other way around.
I'm going to remember that one. We don't want the tax tail wagging the dog.
Definitely
That's a good
not.
way to remember it. So, Christine, we've got the tax considerations. We've got the personal financial planning under control. What else do we need to consider well in advance of planning our exit?
I think for me, the biggest experience is seeing business owners who actually don't know what the process is going to be, the sale process. So they think that they can put their business up for sale, and or they can announce that the business is for sale, and that within 6 months the business will be sold. You know, you can find a buyer, go through the due diligence process, and then transfer the ownership. And actually, it's incredibly rare that happens. It could be that you get approached, but if you haven't already done your planning, then, and you don't know what your business is worth right now, when you get approached with what looks like a decent figure, you actually have no idea whether it is a good figure or not. It's a good figure for the buyer, but as the seller, you could actually be leaving lots of money on the table. So for me, it's the best time to start planning is right now, because then you know what the process is going to be, you know what all the component parts are going to be, you know what's going to trip you up, and then you know how you can prepare. And in the preparation process, you know, depending on your timeline, what you want to put effort into to make your business worth more. And it could be you don't want to do anything and you leave value on the table for the next person who owns the business to come and develop that value. Because one of the things that I'm very aware of is a business owner can actually sit in their business, owning their business, hoping for the day when it's going to be worth 10 million. When actually, if they sold their business for $500,000 today, they would get everything that they needed for their retirement, and their life would just be so much better. So and it sounds like an extreme, $500,000, but I've seen people holding out for a ridiculous number, like Guy just alluded to, when actually, if they took that money now, they would have the happiest retirement that they could have, and they could have it right now.
Surely money's not the only driver for business owners when they're moving forward, guys. What else do we see driving business owners? We're hearing that they need to plan, they need to be, that puts them on the front foot so the buyer's not going to take advantage of them. We don't want them to miss the opportunity of getting the most from their life's work after they've spent so many years and effort in building this business. We often hear that business is my baby from business owners. What else? What are the other considerations? Money, the outcome, what I get for all of this, but what else do you see business owners, the driving forces to motivate them?
I think having a business makes people feel important as well, and I think there's a very much a tendency that once that's gone, if they've sold it, then what's their purpose? You can be sat with 7 figures in the bank, but actually, what you're going to do between 9 till 5 when you used to have something to do. And some people might actually use it as an excuse not to be proactive, because it just means that they're caught up being busy and actually having that importance of, I'm the owner of the company, I'm the founder of this place, and people look up to me, they respect me, I employ people, I contribute to HMRC and this, that and the other. And it's a bit of a weird psychology, but I'm sure that it exists. And I've had clients that have sold their business that almost wish they hadn't, because it's, one guy I'm thinking of in particular was the 3rd iteration of the sale, and he just repeated the idea on a couple of times, and the final time he really didn't want to sell it because he wouldn't have anything to do with his time, and he'd already got a load of money, and what was the point? So that definitely exists, but it shouldn't deter people from planning, which is what we're talking about, and it shouldn't deter them from being ready for exit. Whether or not they choose to take that is a separate matter altogether.
That's a really critical point. I think, guys, getting your business ready for exit just gives you more choices. You're now informed. One of the biggest blockages to sale, which I think you're referring to, is that business owners need to know what they're going to go on to next. what's life after this business for me? Because I get a hell of a lot of self-worth, satisfaction, fulfillment from running and driving the business. Yes, I'm contributing to society. I'm having an impact. I'm helping a whole lot of other families. But we can't underestimate the feeling of satisfaction, drive. What are the drivers for the people? So we need to help them find what's next for them, so that they can move forward. So okay, so we want to get them out of their own way as blockers. Jeremy, what's your experience in business owners preparing? Tax, money, cash in the bank is some of the motivators for exit. What else do you see?
Well, the other things that they often want to think about in terms of planning, and it's something that is often key at the beginning, and that can sometimes be filtered out a little bit as they go along the process, is actually what they're leaving behind. So they themselves know what they want to go on and do, but there's that question of legacy, and making sure that actually something that's got perhaps their name on it is still going to be what they consider to be their baby even after they walk out the door, and also perhaps looking out for the staff, because a lot of them, if they've built up a business like this entrepreneurially, they are looking out for the staff that they're leaving behind. So there's a whole load of culture considerations that go into that in terms of the right fit for a sale, which I'm not going to get into. But from a tax perspective, they can often be looking at some sort of situation whereby the staff get something out of that. And it may be that planning ahead, literally, I'm talking about years planning ahead, they'll put in place some sort of employee incentive, some sort of share scheme that has got that works through the right way, that is tax efficient for the business, which allows the owners to do something that is right for their team and is not going to be expensive to them, and also provides the right motivation for people moving forward. So that's a key part of it from a tax planning perspective, and that needs to be something that's done well in advance, and it's not an uncommon thing. There are a lot of very, very good and emotional employers who want to make sure the people they leave behind are left feeling good about it, if that makes sense.
Totally. So Christine, any insights on that? Like we're talking about now, we're moving into the different types of structures. We're now suggesting that, hey, look, employee ownership is something that could be explored. We've got the different tax advantages, so the different revenues, cash flows, and what it means in the bank for the business owners afterwards. What about employee ownership? Is that what difference does that make?
Okay, well, I actually want to talk about something a bit different to employee ownership, because Jeremy makes some really good points about employee ownership, and there's a lot of planning to go into that. But before you start thinking about that, you also need to think about what else you might be leaving behind if you don't leave your business in planned circumstances. So the real importance about planning is, yes, it's about the legacy, it's about having a better business that's worth more. But what happens if something unexpected happens? If you haven't done any planning at all, you're going to leave a real mess behind. You're going to leave a family behind that's struggling to cope without you, whether that's because you've died or you've become disabled or incapacitated in some way. They're coping with now having to think about a business to run, as well as the loss that they're experiencing, both in income and the emotional attachment to you. And equally, your employees will be suffering from that loss too. Now, bringing in the planning of actually making yourself technically redundant in your business as the first thing that makes your business worth more. It'll make your business more enjoyable for you. And making yourself technically redundant so that you're only working strategically means that your staff are now engaged. So that really links into the employee ownership side of things, because engaging your employees is a whole lot easier if there is something there's a reward for them at the end that's just more than money. Because if you think about your need to be the business owner and how proud you feel about what you're achieving, wouldn't it be really nice if your employees had that ownership mindset? And getting to ownership mindset is, employee ownership is part of it. And it doesn't just happen overnight. You don't say, well, I'm going to get an ownership mindset. It takes time to build that in. But as you're easing yourself out of the day-to-day, but still critical to the strategy of the business, and you're elevating your employees up in the way that they engage with the business is worth more. The employees have got, particularly if you're going down the employee ownership plan, the employees are much more engaged. They become more efficient and more effective. There's usually a bump, about 17% on average, in profitability of businesses that go through the employee ownership route, and it starts pretty immediately. So it has an immediate impact on the value of the business. But equally, it means that should the unexpected happen to you or any of the members of your senior management team, your business is not wholly affected by it. And that's the real reason why we need to do planning.
So what we're hearing is a big part of planning your exit for your business is planning the unplanned exit for your business. What should happen if I exit unexpectedly? What happens to the ownership of the business? What happens to the spouses, the families? So there's a big area that we uncover. Guy, is this something that you cater for in your planning side of things with owners?
Yeah, 100%. That really resonated with me, and I feel slightly jealous and embarrassed that it wasn't me that raised the topic. But death and illness is something that I speak about on a daily basis. I try not to be too depressing about it, but yeah, the reality is that people die, and they die of a young age. So we can transfer some of that risk in terms of the financial aspects of it and money for the period of time afterwards, while there's the period of recovering and people coming to terms with the fact that somebody's passed away. And we do that through shareholder protection, key person insurance, relevant life insurance, those sort of things, to help the families and the company survive a period of upheaval, essentially. But granted, as Christine's referring to, there's a whole host of other things that go with that. What are the bank account details? What are the passwords? And that's just scraping the surface, because there's a lot more in terms of important legal documents. What does the shareholders agreement say? All sorts of stuff has to be dealt with. And it's important to have an inventory of these are all the important documents that you need. Where will you find them? And how can you make sense of them? So, I mean, in my business, I have to have a locum. And we have to have locum agreements so somebody can literally fill my shoes the very next day. I wonder how many people have that within their businesses in different walks of life altogether. That's a stipulation of my trading set upon me by the regulator, which is great, but it forces you to think about those things. And that's just one aspect. Who's going to do the day to day? There's so much more. And when you think about it, who would really actually want to put their hand up and say they would want to leave a great big mess for their family? It's only going to tarnish their memories of you. So. Yeah.
Well, it's a mess for your family, and it's also a mess for your business partners and the business as to who's going to look after that, who's going to run it, what is left behind. Jeremy, is that something that you see in the clients you work with?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a number of different things here. First of all, the importance of having a business that can move on without you is first of all fundamental to the idea of planning for your exit in planned circumstances, because being able to do that, to be able to walk away and the business continues the same as it did the day before, is going to have value to a potential purchaser. And in many ways, it's even more important in the situation of an unplanned exit. The principle is the same, but it becomes more stark and more obvious. And that's when it starts to come into various accounting issues and also legal issues. So we've already touched upon where is the documentation, where have you got everything ready so that someone can pick up and run with it. And our profession, like with Guy, we have to have people who are able to pick up and run with us. I'm in a multi-partner partnership, so that's easy, but sole practitioners have to have that backup. But many entrepreneurs will not have that system in place. So simple things, a very simple thing is a business that only has one one officer, a director, in that respect, if that director is suddenly incapacitated, everything can stop, because there's no one that can talk to the bank. There's no one that can do anything else. So simple things like, we recommend to our clients, they need to have more than one officer. That's a simple thing, so that actually, God forbid anything happens, that can be picked up straight away, and there's somebody else who can at least appoint a new director. If they're already a director, then great stuff. Having these things tied into shareholder or partnership agreements is also key, because you don't want a situation whereby John and Mary have been running their business successfully, and when John or Mary pops their clogs, their spouse, because they're not married to each other in this particular case, all of a sudden owns 50% of a business that the other person knows nothing about. So now you've got a business supporting John, who's doing all the work, and Mary's spouse, who does none of the work but owns 50% of the business. And so those types of things need to be put in place, and things like what Guy would be able to ensure is that you've got a policy that pays out, so that people can, the business can move on and survive, and the people that are left behind by the family are protected financially, and the people are happy. Without that, these horrible things can happen. And so that side of it from a planning perspective is key, and we see that as part of the financial side of it. The other side of it, as I alluded to, is just having systems, and I know that's a whole other topic, and I can do that on a different discussion point. But having systems in place so that the business can move forward is key in both a planned and an unplanned exit, because one protects value, the other adds value, so that's why it's crucial.
Brilliant. So Guy alluded to, he started to touch on, hey, look, we need some sort of portfolio or file of all these things and pieces of information that we should be gathering that for such a situation as a bit of an insurance policy. And what I think he alluded to also was the fact that perhaps we need some other professionals involved. We need the personal financial planning, the wealth management side of things. We need the business planning, succession planning, exit planning gurus. We need the tax and financial planning. Who else do we need in to contribute to putting together such a document?
Well, I would for sure include a lawyer within that, because we should be drafting wills. We should be looking at lasting power of attorneys as well. And we should be having cross-option agreements so that actually we can make any shareholder payments inheritance tax efficiently as well. And I often find actually that the cross-option agreements are missing where people have done the shareholder insurances. So it sounds like a technical point, but it's really quite straightforward. I'm not going to explain it now, but it's really not that difficult. It's just something that I often see missed. And it's because people don't engage necessarily with a legal professional or with a financial advisor even, and they've taken a step to take insurance, which is phenomenal because not many people do that. But they've not gone that extra mile and actually done the job properly. And it's those little mistakes that the cost of that is far greater than people ever really appreciate. To pay 40% on that value that's being passed on to your beneficiaries is massive.
Yeah. And I've often heard Christine talk about getting lawyers involved for things like shareholder agreements, which define the business structures as well. Anything to add around that, Christine?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I completely violently agree with what Guy was saying. And often the reason why people don't do these things, even though they are really simple and relatively cheap, is because they actually don't know the right question to ask. And sadly, we're pretty forward-thinking professionals, but sadly, a lot of people in these professional fields don't help the business owner ask the right questions. They don't make it accessible. So actually making things more accessible is really key. It's almost like our professional duties is to recognize that we've got a business owner who's actually a human being and there is a business, and that the identity of these two things are actually really wrapped together. And we've got to deal with human beings who can be afraid of asking the wrong question or racking up charges, etc. And they're also protecting their business. So there's stuff that we can advise them from a business perspective, and then we actually need to treat them like human beings. And it's about helping them understand what all the steps in the process are, and therefore what it is that they need along the way that makes their life easier, so that they're making educated choices. But sadly, there's, both accounting, in financial planning, in the legal field, in general consulting, if we make this a bit smoke and mirrors, it'll make it look more complicated and harder, and therefore you'll pay me a bigger fee. And actually, it's really about paying the right fee to the right people to answer the right question that gives you the best outcome. And that really comes back to, when should we start planning? Well, we need to plan right now. How do we start planning? We begin with the end in mind. And we have to explore those different ends. A planned exit, or what if the unexpected happens? And we don't need to boil the ocean with all the different choices that things that might happen to us along the way. But at least if we look at those two extremes of, the ideal situation is, I'm going to get my business into shape so that I can sail off into the sunset, knowing that I've left people with jobs, adding value to the economy, feeling really proud of the value that I've added, as well as enjoying the rewards for all that value. But equally, there's a 60% chance that I'm either going to die or get a disease that's going to incapacitate me, or actually become incapacitated, permanently disabled. So given that there's quite a high chance of that happening, why don't I do some preparation for that, just in case?
Okay. So we've perhaps sucked the life out of the conversation now with all of the thoughts and considerations that go into planning for an unplanned exit. So we need to address those topics. They're critical because of I like Guy's description, the mess we're going to leave behind. We don't want to leave that mess behind for our families and for our business owners. So given the topic for the conversation today was, when should I start planning? And I think you guys all jumped down my neck unanimously. You really got to begin with the end in mind, Daryl. You've got to start planning from day one. But for those business owners who haven't been planning from day one, they're getting to the end, they've been business for 10, 20, 30 years, and they're getting to that point where they're starting to say, hey, look, I'm actually thinking I might want to sell my business or get out of my business one way or another. And some of them are going, hey, look, I might want to do that next year. What's your advice to them if they've got a bit of a runway left? How long do they really need to start planning their exit, if they've left everything to the last minute? What do you advise, Jeremy?
How long? The answer is as long as they've got available. But what they should be doing is today is the right day to do it. And they need to be sitting down with somebody like a professional. I would say have a conversation with Guy or with Christine or with me, and establishing, what is that number? What is it they need, and when do they want it? That, boiled it down, is going to be the target. And from there, we can then start putting in place the plans that needed to get to that. So how long do they need? The truth is, the longer you've got to plan it, the better. Because you can put in place the right structures. You can then look to be able to build value over a reasonable period of time that's then going to demonstrate the validity of that value. Because if you've done something that only turns up in 6 months, it's not going to be quite as convincing as to showing 5 or 6 years worth of solid figures to somebody. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. So the answer to your question is as much time as they've got. But start today.
Yep. Brilliant. Christine, from your perspective, exit planning, how long do you really need to make an impact on, we haven't even touched on valuations of business. How long do you need to help make an impact?
I completely agree with Jeremy. I've been through exits that have been really, really short and chaotic, and money has been left on the table as a result. So actually, your planning journey can start whenever you want it to. But maybe the better question is, if you're procrastinating, is how much do you want to leave on the table? Because the longer you leave it, the more you're leaving typically you're going to leave more on the table. every now and again, someone will get lucky, because a lot of selling a business is really about timing. But isn't it better to be in your timing than anybody else's? Isn't it better for you to be in control? Yeah, start now. And if you can't start today, then start tomorrow. But don't be like a recent conversation that we shared, which was I'm 20 years into a 3-year plan. That made me laugh.
So Guy, you're working with the business owners. They've got this magic number of how much they'd like to have at retirement. How often do they come to you and say, hey, look, my business is my pension. How do you help me plan? What do you do in that situation?
I think I've probably heard that phrase with every business owner I've ever spoken to. So, and equally, the reality that often goes with that is that the pension that they have, the real pension, is very seldom there. And if it is, it's tiny. And it's because it was forced upon them at some point in time when they're an employee back in the day, or auto enrollment now that we've got that. But yeah, I mean, for me, one of the key things we always look at with clients is how do we extract the profits from the company, and how do we do that as tax efficiently as possible? And ultimately, a pension is the most tax efficient way that you can draw the money out of the company, because it comes out pre-corporation tax. So even when we talk about entrepreneurs relief, which is great, you've still got to pay 10% tax, and you've still paid 19% currently corporation tax. So a pension's always going to trump that, but people just don't often think about it. And now we've got annual allowances and lifetime allowances and all those sorts of things. As Christine and Jeremy have both already said, it's about how much do you want to leave on the table. It's about the opportunity cost. I see a lot of companies that have got far more money than they need in the bank, and it's because they might be prudent. It's because they might be looking for an opportunity to acquire somebody, but very often I just find it's because they are being prudent and they're risk averse. But what are they missing out on? They're missing out on stock markets rising. They're missing out on reducing the amount of tax that they'll pay on taking that money out of the company. And if they'd started with a plan in mind and they'd said, well, hey, this is my number, what we will do is we'll just make sure they get to that number, but paying as little tax as possible, and not even just at that point in time. Also, after they've sold, we've got to think about tax considerations then. So if we've already spoken about death, but let's say you've sold your company and you've got a big pension pot and you die pre-75, it's outside of your estate for inheritance tax planning. So, that's better than having a load of money sat in the bank, because that's going to be subject to inheritance tax. So there's an even bigger picture beyond the sale of the business as well. So it's really difficult to say when should you do it other than now, because that is just the most obvious thing to say. And having the longest runway possible is great, because we want to maximize the value that we can get. Who doesn't? I mean, who in their right mind would say that they don't want to? So yeah, there's loads of different things, and people will miss out on entrepreneurs relief, as Jeremy said earlier, and people will, without realizing, miss out on business property relief, or their estate would do. So it's these simple things that we can identify and make people aware of, and that's how we'll add value to them. And now is definitely the time.
Yeah. So what we're hearing is that the sooner you start, the better, because you can take advantage of all of the savings opportunities, if you like, by investing in a pension. You don't have all your eggs in the one basket. There's additional tax benefits by, if I call it, drip feeding every year. What I think I've also heard is that people are calmer when they've got, they know that all their financial affairs are sorted and that they are financially free, and so therefore they're working for the choice. They need to work. Jeremy identified that, hey, look, the longer runway of financial records and history you've got, the more information you've got to be prepared and on the front foot to, let's say, keep buyers in their place. Not that Jeremy used those words, but you're not going to get bullied around, because you know exactly where you stand. You know what the valuation points are in your business. And Christine alluded to all of the other the I guess the employee, the running the business, just having the business in control and the business owners knowing exactly what's going to happen, and you've got systems and processes in place, and you're redundant in your business so that you're getting your own career progression as a business owner, moving through the business because you've got those various structures in place. The things that I feel we're light on is that we really need some legal expertise adding to this conversation, to this mix, and that would really scope what Guy alluded to, is having this portfolio of key important information all in one place. So that's something to explore in a future episode. We skimmed over employee ownership, and perhaps there's a topic there for a whole conversation, I think, which we can talk about. So I think, guys, great first conversation. Is there anything that anyone feels that they really need to add, that they've been itching to get out and share about when business owners really need to start planning their exit? Final points or summary points.
I think I'm sure we could go on forever, but equally, I think that the most of the salient points I think you've drawn out of us today, Daryl. Thank you.
Brilliant. And look, you've made my job easy, because I've got three people here really, I think, and it came out with the emotion and energy about sharing the points that, you guys are all experts. You've got a whole bucket load of experience in this area in working with people, so you can really help. We'll include all your contact details in the post and on the podcast. So thanks for joining me today. Thanks for your energy, your passion, your commitment. We'll see you on the next show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.